The morning it started, I was standing in my kitchen in socks, wiping a ring of coffee off the counter with the side of a dish towel. The window over the sink was cracked open. I could hear a garbage truck somewhere down the block and the soft clicking sound of my old refrigerator cycling on and off. My phone buzzed on the table. When I looked down, I saw my stepmother's name. I almost let it ring out. I should have. But I answered, and the first thing she said was, "Please try to sound coherent if the judge speaks to you." I did not say anything right away. I just stood there with the towel in my hand, looking at the basil plant on the sill that I kept forgetting to water. Then I asked, "What judge?" There was a short pause. Not surprise. More like satisfaction. "Oh," she said, in that soft, careful voice she used when she wanted to sound concerned in front of other people. "I assumed your attorney had explained it by now." I remember setting the towel down very neatly, folding it once, then again. On the table beside me was a large brown envelope I had picked up from my mailbox the night before and left unopened because I had been tired and because, if I am honest, I already knew it was going to be trouble. I put my hand on it and said, "I haven't opened anything yet." Another pause. "Well," she said, "then I suppose you'll find out soon enough." And she hung up. I stood there for a few seconds after the line went dead, holding the phone against my ear, listening to nothing. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a petition filed in probate court in Tarrant County. My father had been dead just under a year. My stepmother, Elaine, was asking the court to declare me mentally unfit to manage the family trust. There are moments in life when your body understands something before your mind catches up. I felt it first in my hands. Not shaking exactly, just cold. I sat down at the kitchen table and read every page once. Then I read it again. According to Elaine, I had become erratic, confused, unable to handle basic financial decisions. She claimed I forgot appointments, ignored bills, and spoke in ways that did not make sense. There was an attached statement from a psychologist I had never met. There were references to my declining stability and impaired judgment. She had even listed 2 relatives as concerned witnesses. By the 3rd page, I was no longer surprised. I was only interested, because none of this had begun with the petition. It had started months earlier, quietly, in the same way most serious theft begins. Not with broken glass or raised voices, with small movements no one was supposed to notice. My father had been a careful man. He kept clean files, dated folders, labeled keys. He believed bills should be paid before dinner and that signatures mattered. After my mother died, he changed in the way grieving people sometimes do. Not all at once. He just became easier to influence, easier to tire out, easier to direct. Elaine knew how to make that look like love. She married him less than a year after the funeral. She learned his routines. She started answering his phone. She began speaking for him in little ways, then larger ones. By the time he got sick, most people around him had stopped noticing the difference. When he died, I was the one in the hospital room. Elaine was in the corridor talking to someone from the brokerage office. That detail stayed with me. A week after the funeral, I learned 3 things. The first was that my father had revised his estate documents the previous year. Elaine received the house. The trust, which held several commercial properties and the main investment accounts, passed to me. The second was that she had known about that change long before he died. The third was the one that mattered. Money had already started moving. Not enough to start a family war in broad daylight. Not enough for someone careless to catch in a glance. But enough for someone patient to follow. That was where she made her mistake. For most of the family, I was the quiet daughter with a numbers job downtown. I wore plain clothes. I drove an old Honda. I showed up on time, left early, and did not talk much at holidays. What Elaine never understood was that for 6 years, before I moved into internal audit, I had worked financial fraud reviews for a regional firm outside Dallas. Slow cases. Paper cases. The kind where the answer was always there if you sat still long enough and let the record speak. So I did not call anyone when I saw the petition. I did not defend myself. I did not text my aunt. I did not panic. I made coffee. I got out a yellow legal pad. I wrote 3 lines. Step 1, read everything. Step 2, answer nothing too soon. Step 3. Verify where the money went. Then I pulled my laptop closer, opened the first spreadsheet, and started building a timeline. Outside, the garbage truck moved on. The street went quiet again. And by noon, I found the first transfer that should never have existed. The first transfer was for $4,800. It had gone out of the trust's operating account on a Thursday afternoon at 2:17 p.m. The recipient was a limited liability company I had never seen before with a name so generic it almost disappeared on the page. North Bend Holdings, LLC. I wrote the name down. Then I kept going. By the end of that day, I had found 9 more. Different amounts. Different dates. Same general pattern. Nothing round. Nothing flashy. The sort of figures meant to look routine if someone glanced too quickly and moved on. I did not move on. My apartment was quiet except for the small electric hum from the lamp on the desk and the occasional sound of tires outside on the wet street below. It had rained that morning, and the window glass still held a faint gray shine from it. I remember taking off my watch and setting it beside the keyboard because I knew I would be there for hours. That became my routine. I went to work. I came home. I reheated something simple, usually soup or rice or whatever was already in the refrigerator. Then I sat down with account records, login histories, tax filings, property records, and transfer reports until midnight or later. Sometimes until 2. I told no one. That part was important. Elaine expected emotion. She expected calls, accusations, maybe some tearful confrontation she could repeat to the family with a worried expression. She needed me to behave like someone unraveling. The petition had made that clear. This was not only about money. This was about credibility. If she could make me look unstable, then every question I asked after that would sound like proof of the story she had already planted. So I stayed polite. I answered her texts with 1 or 2 sentences when I had to. I went to Sunday lunch at her house twice that month. Her dining room always smelled faintly of lemon polish and whatever candle she was burning near the entry table. She would set down iced tea in tall glasses and touch my wrist when she spoke, always just lightly, as if we were close. "You look tired," she told me once, handing me a plate of chicken salad. "Are you sleeping enough?" I smiled and said, "Work has been busy." She nodded in that slow, sympathetic way she had. My cousin Melissa was there that afternoon. So was my Aunt Joanne. They both heard it. That was the point. Elaine was laying down small pieces of language in public. Tired, stressed, forgetful, overwhelmed. Nothing dramatic on its own. Just enough, repeated often enough, to prepare the room. I let her do it. At home, the records kept opening. North Bend Holdings led to another company. That company led to a mailing service in Cheyenne. From there I found a second entity, then a third. One had a registered agent in Wyoming. Another was tied to a filing address outside Reno. All 3 had bank activity that matched the timing of the trust withdrawals within a day or 2. It was careful work, but not brilliant work. The people who do this sort of thing often mistake paperwork for invisibility. They think if they add enough layers, no one will want to sit still long enough to peel them back. I wanted to, so I built folders. Red for transfers, blue for corporate records, green for account access logs, yellow for anything touching the petition or the medical claims. I printed some things. I saved others to encrypted storage. I requested certified copies where I could. When I could not get something directly, I noted where to subpoena it later. Dates, names, amounts, filing numbers, device timestamps. Facts have a calming effect on me. They always have. About 3 weeks into it, I found the first clean overlap between the trust account and Elaine's personal life. It was not a direct payment to her. People like Elaine are usually more careful than that, at least in the beginning. But one of the companies receiving funds had made a payment on a condominium lease in Southlake. The cosigner listed on the lease was not Elaine. It was a man named Warren Pike. I knew that name. He was a real estate broker she had once described to my father as just a friend from church. I had met him twice. Once at a charity event, once at a Christmas dinner where he stayed too late and drank too comfortably in my father's kitchen. I remember leaning back in my chair after I saw the lease and looking at the ceiling for a long moment. Not because I was shocked, just because the shape of things was becoming cleaner. A few days later, the petition packet was supplemented with a formal psychological opinion from the same man whose name appeared in the first filing, Dr. Leonard Voss. According to his statement, I showed signs of impaired executive function, emotional instability, and diminished financial judgment. He had never examined me. He had never spoken to me. The report was based on information provided by family. I read it once, then set it aside and made a fresh page on the legal pad. Step 1, let them commit fully. Step 2, document every false statement. Step 3, wait for the setting that requires them to repeat it under oath. Then I waited. A week later, I got notice of the hearing date. And that was when I began putting the binder together. I bought the binder at an office supply store on a Tuesday evening after work. It was plain black. Nothing unusual about it. I remember standing in the aisle under that bright retail lighting, holding 2 different sizes in my hands, and choosing the heavier one because I knew the rings would hold up better once it was full. By then I had stopped thinking of the hearing as a family matter. It was a records problem. That shift helped. When you stop asking why someone would do something and start asking how they did it, the air clears a little. You sleep better. Or at least you think more clearly while you're awake. At home, I spread everything across my dining table in careful stacks. Bank statements, certified filings, access logs, transfer confirmations, screenshots with timestamps, notes from 2 separate calls with the trust administrator, a copy of the petition, the psychologist's statement. Every page had a place. I built it the way I used to build case files. Front section, summary timeline. Second section, outgoing transfers from the trust. Third section, corporate entities and ownership trails. Fourth section, digital access records. Fifth section, false statements in the petition. Sixth section, supporting references for counsel if counsel ever became necessary. I was not trying to make it dramatic. I was trying to make it usable. That matters more than people think. In a hearing room, no one wants a speech. What they want is sequence. Something they can follow with their own eyes. A trail that does not ask for belief, only attention. A few days after I started assembling it, Elaine called and left me a voicemail. Her voice was warm, almost sleepy. "Sweetheart, I heard you sounded upset when the paperwork arrived. I know this is painful, but this is only temporary. We all want what's best for you. Call me when you feel steady enough." I listened to it once. Then I saved it. Not because the message itself proved much. It did not. But tone matters. Timing matters. Language matters. The words temporary and steady enough told me she had moved past planning and into possession. In her mind, this was already done. I put the phone face down. Then I kept working. Around that time, my Aunt Joan invited me to lunch. We met at a cafe near the museum district, a quiet place with white tile floors and small metal water glasses that sweated onto the table. She stirred lemon into her tea and kept looking at me with that careful face people use when they think they are approaching something delicate. Finally, she said, "Elaine is worried about you." I nodded once. She said, "You've been withdrawing," Joan added. "That you've seemed not yourself." There was a small clatter from the kitchen behind us. Someone dropped a tray. A few people looked up, then went back to their food. I folded my napkin in half and asked, "Do I seem not myself to you?" She hesitated. That was the part one noticed. Not her words. The hesitation before them. "You seem tired," she said. "I am tired," I answered. "My father died." She looked down at the table after that. I did not push her. There was no point. Elaine had been preparing the witnesses, just as I expected. Not with anything too large. Just repeated concern, delivered in private. A worried call. A lunch. A lowered voice. It is easy to sell a lie when the lie makes the speaker look compassionate. After lunch, I sat in my car for a few minutes with the engine off and wrote down everything Joanne had said while it was still fresh. Date, time, exact phrasing, even the order of the sentences. That evening, I got a call back from a contact I trusted, an investigator I had worked with years earlier on a vendor fraud matter. I did not give him the full story, only the parts one needed checked. The next morning, he sent over a packet. One of the shell companies receiving trust money had a private banking link to an investment account. The mailing address attached to the internal correspondence was not a business office. It was a UPS box in Arlington. The recovery email on file referenced Elaine's initials and the birth year she used on older shopping accounts. Small thing, but useful. The larger thing came 2 pages later. A device identifier tied to several transfer authorizations matched a home laptop warranty registration from Elaine's address. That was the first moment I allowed myself to lean back and close my eyes. Not because I was relieved, because I knew the center of it now. Until then, I had evidence that money was being moved and that the movement benefited people around Elaine. After that packet, I had something cleaner. Something narrower. Not suspicion. Not theory. Direction. The hearing was still 10 days away. Long enough for them to get careless. Long enough for me to test one more thing. So the next morning, before sunrise, I sat at my table with fresh coffee, opened the binder to a blank tab in the back, and made a new heading in block letters. Authority claims because if Elaine intended to take control of the trust in court, she was going to need a reason she could point to on paper. And paper leaves marks. The next thing I looked for was not more theft. It was justification. Money can disappear in a dozen ways, but when someone wants a court to hand them control, they usually need a document that makes the taking look authorized. Maybe a letter. Maybe a directive. Maybe some vague note about intentions. People who lie on paper almost always reach for something that sounds administrative. Calm. Reasonable. Meant to be accepted quickly. So I made the search simple. Step 1. Review every filing line by line. Step 2. Compare each attached document against originals from my father's records. Step 3. Check dates, signatures, and file creation history before reacting to any of it. I kept that order on a notepad beside me for 3 days. By then, the apartment had taken on that stale late-night feeling it gets when work stretches too far past midnight. The air conditioner clicked on and off. My coffee went cold before I finished it. There was a lamp over my shoulder that threw a yellow circle across the table and left the rest of the room in shadow. Somewhere around 1 in the morning, I found it. It was buried in the supplemental filing behind the psychologist's statement and 2 witness affidavits. A 1-page letter supposedly signed by my father 4 months before he died. According to the letter, he had wanted Elaine to assist in all matters concerning trust operations and related financial decision-making if I ever appeared unable to manage my responsibilities. The wording was wrong. That was the first thing. My father did not write like that. He was formal, but plain. He would have said account matters or trust business, not operations, not related financial decision-making. Those were lawyer words trying to sound like his. Then I looked at the signature. At first glance, it was convincing enough. Same slope. Same pressure pattern in the last name. But there was something too smooth about it, especially near the end stroke. I pulled an older property tax document from my file cabinet, set the 2 pages side by side, and looked at them under the desk lamp. The signatures were not merely similar. They were identical. Not naturally identical. Digitally identical. I did not feel anger when I saw it. Just a kind of stillness. I got up, rinsed my mug, came back, and sat down again. Then I started documenting. I scanned both documents at high resolution. I enlarged the signatures. I overlaid them. Same pixel breaks. Same tiny ink gap near the tail of the Y. Same compression artifact on the lower curve. A copied signature is like a repeated fingerprint. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But I needed more than my own eyes. The next morning, I sent the file set to a forensic document examiner I had worked with once before on an insurance matter. We were not close, but he respected clean records, and I knew he would answer honestly. I asked for speed, not favor. While I waited, I went back to the PDF itself. Metadata is not dramatic. It does not speak. It does not accuse. It just sits there until someone bothers to open it. Creation date, modification date, software used, machine pass sometimes if the creator is careless. Elaine's attached letter had been created 9 days after my father's funeral, not before his death. After. I checked again to make sure I had not misread it. Then a third time. The software trail pointed to a desktop version of a legal document editor. The registered user field did not show Elaine's name. It showed the initial CH. Her attorney was named Charles Hensley. I wrote nothing for a full minute. I just looked at the screen and listened to the quiet hum of the room. Then I added a yellow tab to the binder. Questionable authority letter under it. I placed 4 items in order. The filed version of the letter, the earlier tax document with the original signature, the enlarged comparison sheet, and the metadata report. 2 hours later, my examiner called. He was careful with his language, which is one reason I trusted him. "This isn't a live signature," he said. "It appears to be a reproduced image inserted from another source document." "I can put that in writing." "Please do," I said. He sent the signed opinion before the end of the day. That was the moment the case changed shape for me. Up to then, Elaine had been a woman moving money she thought she could keep. Ugly, but common. Once that letter entered the picture, this stopped being private greed and became a false submission to a court. A different level of risk. A different level of consequence. And the hearing itself changed too. Until then, I had assumed I might need to defend myself. After that, I understood something more useful. I did not need to argue about my state of mind at all. I only needed to let them present their version cleanly, under oath, in a room where the record mattered. Then I needed to place the binder in front of the right person and say very little. That afternoon, Elaine sent me a text. "I know this is all hard for you. Wear something nice to court. I want the judge to see that we're trying to support you." I read it once. Then I saved a screenshot, added it to the file, and put the phone face down. The hearing was 5 days away, and for the first time since the petition arrived, I slept through the night. The hearing was set for a Wednesday morning. I left early because I did not want to rush and because I have always preferred arriving before a room fills up. The courthouse was one of those beige government buildings that never seem fully awake, even after opening. Cool air inside. Faint smell of floor cleaner. Low voices carrying farther than they should. I checked in, rode the elevator up, and found a seat on a hard bench outside the probate courtroom. I had worn a navy blazer, low heels, and a white blouse with no pattern. Nothing memorable. My binder sat beside me on the bench, heavy and square. I kept one hand resting on it. When Elaine arrived, she came with Mr. Hensley and 2 relatives from my father's side, plus a woman I recognized from one of Elaine's charity lunches. She moved through the hallway with that careful expression she used in public, chin slightly lowered, mouth arranged into concern. She looked at me, then at the binder, then back at my face. "Well," she said softly, stopping a few feet away, "I'm glad you made it." I stood up and said, "Of course." That was all. Her lawyer gave me a short nod, the kind men give when they think the room already belongs to them. Then he turned back to Elaine and began speaking quietly. She touched his sleeve once while he talked. Reassurance, or a request for it. Hard to say. Inside the courtroom, everything looked exactly the way those rooms usually do. Polished wood. Flags in the corner. Rows of benches worn smooth by years of people sitting through things they did not want to sit through. A clerk at one side. A bailiff near the rail. The judge's bench raised just enough to remind everyone where the authority sat. That matters. Rooms change people. Elaine's side took the table closest to the aisle. I sat alone at the other one. When the judge came in, everyone rose. He was older, silver-haired, with reading glasses low on his nose and the kind of expression that gave away very little. He looked over the file, asked for appearances, then nodded for Mr. Hensley to begin. He stood and moved into it smoothly. "Your Honor," he said, "this is a matter of urgent concern. My client has stepped in only because she believes the respondent can no longer responsibly manage significant trust assets. There have been irregular decisions, missed obligations, and troubling signs of cognitive and emotional instability." He handed up a packet. Then came the psychologist's statement, the witness affidavits, the concern, the restraint, all of it arranged to sound patient and sad. Elaine testified after that. She dabbed once at the corner of her eye with a folded tissue she had brought in ready to use. She said I had become forgetful, withdrawn, confused on the phone. She said I was under strain and no longer seemed able to understand the seriousness of financial matters. She said my father had worried about me near the end of his life. I listened. That part is harder than people think. Not speaking when someone is building a false version of you in public requires more control than speaking ever does. But I had already decided the order of the morning. First, let them commit. Second, let them finish. Third, make the record useful. So I sat still with my hands folded lightly on the table. The judge asked a few questions. Mr. Hensley offered the letter allegedly signed by my father. He referenced the trust losses, over $300,000 moved out without proper management. He argued that the losses themselves proved incapacity. At one point, the judge looked down at me and asked, "Miss Warren, do you have counsel today?" "No, Your Honor," I said. "And are you prepared to respond?" "Yes, sir." He nodded once, then looked back to Elaine's table. "Anything further?" Mr. Hensley said, "Not at this time." The room went quiet. Not empty quiet, expectant quiet. I stood up, picked up the binder, and asked, "Your Honor, may I approach?" He said yes. I walked to the bench, placed the binder in front of him, and opened it to the summary tab. My voice sounded normal to me. That helped. "I'm not going to address the medical claims first," I said. "I'd like to begin with the money, because that appears to be the basis of the petition." The judge glanced at the first page. I turned to the red section. Over the last 11 months, 43 transfers were made out of the trust operating account to 3 outside entities. I traced those transfers. The amounts, dates, and receiving accounts are indexed here. I moved one tab forward. The 3 entities are shell companies. Their ownership trails are here. The beneficial connection points lead back to Ms. Elaine Warren or persons financially tied to her. At that, I heard movement behind me on the benches. A shift. Someone drawing in breath. Mr. Hensley stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I object to this characterization without foundation." I turned one page and said, "The foundation is in the next section." The judge lifted one hand toward him without taking his eyes off the binder. "Sit down, Mr. Hensley." He sat. I opened the blue section. These pages show access records tied to the transfer authorizations. Same device family. Same residential network origin. The associated warranty registration and recovery contact are linked to Ms. Warren's home address. Elaine made a small sound then. Not a word. More like air catching wrong in the throat. I did not look at her. That was deliberate. I turned to the yellow tab. And, because this petition relies in part on a letter supposedly signed by my father granting Ms. Warren authority in trust matters, I had that document reviewed. The judge's pen stopped moving. I placed the examiner's report on top of the open page and said, "The signature was copied from an earlier filing. The PDF metadata indicates the document was created after my father died." This time I did look toward Elaine's table. Not long, just long enough. Mr. Hensley had gone completely still, and the judge reached up, removed his glasses, and looked first at the letter, then at Elaine, then back at me. No one in the room spoke. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds after that. Not confused quiet. The other kind. The kind that settles in when people realize the structure they were leaning on is no longer holding. The judge looked down at the report again, then at the metadata sheet, then at the transfer summary. He did not say anything right away. He set his glasses on the bench beside him and turned one more page in the binder with his fingertips. Mr. Hensley stood up. "Your Honor, I would ask for a brief recess so we can review whatever materials she has just handed up." The judge did not look at him. "You filed this petition," he said. "Did you not review the supporting exhibits before submitting them to this court?" Mr. Hensley opened his mouth, then closed it. Elaine spoke before he could answer. "She's twisting this," she said. "She always does this. She takes normal things and turns them into something ugly. Robert wanted me to help. He said so many times. I turned back toward the bench and said, 'There are no trust amendments giving her that authority, Your Honor. Those are tabbed in the back. The controlling documents are clean.' The judge nodded once. Then he looked at Elaine directly. "Mrs. Warren," he said, "did you move trust funds into entities connected to you?" Mr. Hensley said quickly, "Do not answer that." But she was already leaning forward. "I was protecting assets," she said. "He was sick. Things were disorganized. Someone had to handle it." The judge asked, "With written authority?" She hesitated. That was the first honest thing she had done all morning. Not honesty in words. Honesty in delay. I opened the binder to the corporate records section and said, "Your Honor, if it helps, the lease payments and brokerage deposits tied to those entities are cross-referenced here. There's also a joint account connection involving a third party." I did not say the man's name yet. I did not need to. The judge was already following the trail. He turned 2 more pages. On the benches behind us, I could hear one of my relatives crying quietly. I did not turn around to see who it was. It did not matter. What mattered was the record in front of the bench and the fact that Elaine had now made statements in open court that could be compared directly against it. The judge asked the clerk for the original filing packet. She handed it up. He separated the authority letter from the rest and held it for a moment, not dramatically, just carefully, as if its weight had changed. Then he set it down and said, "This document appears facially suspect." Mr. Hensley tried again. "Your Honor, with respect, this is becoming accusatory in a hearing that was scheduled for temporary protective oversight. If the court wishes to continue the matter, no," the judge said. Just that. Then he looked at me. "Miss Warren, are you asserting that the petition itself was part of an effort to obtain control over assets already removed from the trust?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "That is my position." "Based on your review of the records?" "Yes, sir." He gave a short nod and asked, "And the losses referenced in the petition? The ones being used as evidence of your alleged incapacity. Those were, in your view, caused by the petitioner?" "Yes, sir." The judge leaned back slightly in his chair. "I see." Elaine's face had changed by then. The softness was gone. So was the performance. She looked tired suddenly. Older. Not because of the evidence itself, I think, but because she could feel the room moving away from her. That is the part people rarely understand about public lies. They seem powerful right up until the exact second they stop working. And then they collapse all at once. The judge put his glasses back on, reviewed one more page, and began speaking slowly so the court reporter could take it down cleanly. "This court finds there has been no competent showing of incapacity on the part of the respondent." He turned a page. "The request for emergency control over the trust is denied." Then another page. "Given the questions raised today regarding the movement of estate-related funds, the authenticity of a filed exhibit, and representations made to this court under oath, I am directing the clerk to preserve the full record and refer this matter for further review." Elaine made a low sound, almost like she was trying to interrupt without fully deciding to. Mr. Hensley put a hand near her arm, but not quite on it. The judge continued. "I am also ordering that no changes be made to the trust structure or related accounts by the petitioner pending any subsequent proceedings. If funds remain traceable, they're to remain traceable." He looked at me again. "Miss Warren, you may wish to retain counsel." "I understand, Your Honor," I said. Then he looked at Mr. Hensley. "And you, sir, may wish to do the same." No one spoke after that. He signed the order. The clerk took it. The bailiff stepped closer. The hearing was over. I closed the binder and held it against my side. As people began to rise from the benches, I heard my aunt say my name from somewhere behind me, but I did not stop right away. I walked out into the hallway first, past the framed courthouse notices and the row of hard chairs under the window, and only then did I slow down. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone down the corridor was laughing about something unrelated. The ordinary sound of it felt almost strange. A few moments later, my aunt came out with her face pale and careful. "I didn't know," she said. I believed that she believed that. "I know," I told her. She asked if I was all right. I looked down at the binder in my hands, then back at her. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." And for the first time in months, that was true. When I got back to my apartment that afternoon, the sink was still full of the 2 coffee cups I had left there that morning. The light in the kitchen had shifted. Softer now. Late-day sun across the counter. The place smelled faintly like paper and dust and the rosemary candle I had forgotten to blow out the night before. I set the binder on the table, took off my blazer, and washed the cups. That was the first thing I wanted to do. Not call anyone. Not explain. Just stand at the sink for a minute and let hot water run over ceramic while the room stayed quiet around me. After that, I opened the windows a little and made tea. There is a strange kind of calm that comes after a long period of watching yourself carefully. Not happiness exactly. More like your body deciding it can finally unclench. I felt that while I folded the dish towel and put it back on the oven handle. I felt it when I straightened the stack of mail by the fruit bowl. Small things. Ordinary things. But they belong to me again. Over the next few weeks, everything moved the way matters like that usually do. Slower than television. Faster than people expect once paperwork starts lining up. I hired counsel. The trust accounts were secured. Subpoenas went out. Records came in. Elaine's version of events got smaller each time it had to pass through an actual document. Some of the money was frozen before it could move again. Some of it took longer. A few people who had been very comfortable around her became difficult to reach. Then reachable. Then cooperative. My aunt called twice to apologize. I let the first call go to voicemail. I answered the second one. We met for lunch a month later in a quieter place than the first time. No speeches. No big repair scene. Just soup, iced tea, and two people speaking more carefully than they used to. That was enough. I did not go back to the old family routines after that. Not most of them. I learned something useful in the middle of all this. Boundaries do not need to be announced to be real. Sometimes you just stop attending the table where you were expected to defend your own existence. I moved to a better apartment that spring. Nothing flashy. Just more light, a safer building, and a second bedroom I turned into a home office with clean shelves and a locking file cabinet. I kept one box from the whole case on the top shelf. Not because I wanted to live in it. Just because I wanted the record to stay where I could reach it if I ever needed to. Most evenings became simple again after that. Tea. Laundry. A walk before dark if the weather was decent. Sometimes I would sit by the window with my laptop closed and listen to the traffic a few streets over and think about how close I had come to letting someone else define the facts for me. That part stays with you. Not the courtroom, actually. Not the judge. Not even the binder. What stays with you is the quieter moment before all of it, when you are sitting alone at a table looking at something that does not make sense and asking yourself whether you are imagining it. You are usually not. And every now and then, when I think the whole thing has finally settled into the past, someone finds a way to remind me that stories like this do not happen only once in a family, or in a city, or in a lifetime. A few months after the hearing, a woman I barely knew reached out through a mutual contact. Her uncle had died. Papers were moving too quickly. A nephew was suddenly very involved. She said she did not know whether she was overreacting. I told her to bring a copy of everything and we would start with dates. That is usually where the truth begins. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. I'm glad you were here. If this kind of calm, steady story is something you enjoy, please like and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I always like seeing how far these stories travel. 2 popular stories will be waiting for you next.